Welcome, everyone, to another edition of The Moving Screen. I'm Brendan Quinn with The Athletic. I'm here alongside Dylan Burkhart of umhoops.com. We are in an undisclosed location in Chrysler Center following Michigan's big win over Indiana and a day removed from Michigan State's big win at Ohio State. This is like a live in-person pod, Dylan. We're not across from computers. It's very intense and personal, man.
A little worried because the last time we tried to do this, we got a lot of feedback that the audio quality was really lacking, but hopefully we will do better for you guys this time around, and a lot to talk about.
No promises on any of that, though. So we're just going to break down the two games this weekend. We felt it was obviously a pretty big-time, two big-time performances by these two teams that we just wanted to kind of talk about individually. And then later this week, we're thinking maybe come back and talk some Big Ten and preview the games ahead for both State and Michigan. So we'll talk first about Michigan because we literally just walked out of the press section where we took in this one and the post-game stuff. Dylan, I did kind of feel like most people were expecting a Michigan win. But there is, especially when you're undefeated, there's always that feeling of like when's something going to happen, or it's they're going to have to lose eventually. This is a decent opponent, so maybe this is it, right? Maybe this is when it kind of goes that way. But it was a very business-like, efficient, impressive win, and I don't know. What do you think?
It's basically a perfect storm for Michigan. Indiana can't really afford to get Juwan Morgan and Romeo Langford in foul trouble for the first media timeout, and the wheels fell off from there. I actually thought Indiana probably played pretty well after they just completely let the game slide away. But you have to give Michigan credit because they just jumped all over them, and Charles Matthews played probably as well as we've seen him play in a while, I'd say. One of his best games he's probably played at Michigan, and it's no surprise that he knew who he was playing against, and that kind of speaks to what this season is all about for him and really this team, I say.
Yeah, it was pretty funny in post game where speaking of Charles, he was asked about Romeo and says no, I know he had a good or he's well regarded, like I'm aware of who he is and blah 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 blah, but like kind of played it cool and didn't make it a thing about like I came here to show him this or that, and then Beeline proceeds to then get up on the podium and kind of say very point blank that yes, this was, we presented Romeo Langford as a challenge for for Charles to prove his worth. And there were a lot of scouts here today. And I've said it before about Charles, like, he gets it. Like, a lot of guys, when it comes to their pro potential, want themselves to be something other than maybe what a scout wants them to be or what a front office person wants them to be. Like, Charles Matthews wants to score just like everyone else and wants to dunk and wants to shoot and do all this stuff, but I think he has the realization that his ticket to whatever his career may or may not be is getting on a court with a guy like Romeo Langford and stuffing him in a closet. And like that's going to stand out more than how many ever points that he does, because I think people know his offensive game, but his defensive game can be the thing that makes him different than every other player.
Yeah, and you see Romeo Langford's an elite athlete, right?
He's awesome.
This is if you want to prove that you can be a 3-and-D player at the next level and you can go do that. It's obviously more experience. Romeo Langford's played in 2 road games ever, but Matthews basically took it to him, and when Michigan jumped out to that big start, it was all about Matthews. He had a couple steals. He had the and-one dunk over Langford that got Langford put on the bench. He drew one of the fouls on Morgan as well, and he just set the tone with his athleticism, and it really reminded me of, I think, the Villanova game. Mm-hmm. He really had a similar performance where he knew the stakes and just took the game right from the opening jump. And if you look now, he's actually shooting 35% from three-point range. Mm. Beeline talked about his three-point shooting trending in the right direction, and he actually talked about putting the ball in his hands more, which we saw with a couple side ball screens. And Michigan had basically completely went away from that before the last couple weeks or so, and they've started to sprinkle some of that back in and see if they can get some of that playmaking out of him that he really wasn't doing for this team nearly as much as he was last year.
And it's so huge because we talked about it with Poole the fact of how much stuff that he can do in ball screens and blah, blah. When you got two, when you have multiple options.
And three, you got to include Xavier Simpson in
Sure.
that. Simpson can now score with that sky hook routinely,
Right.
and he really is the best at seeing the rest of the floor playing out of that action.
Yeah, setting guys up, and he gets a lot of hockey assists out of it too, and all that stuff. And even Brosdakis you can throw him in there when he really gets going. You can throw some ball screens his way
He's
and let
starting
him
to
just go
get
and score.
a lot more of that same action. And what's fascinating for me is watching how teams defend Michigan, and there's a temptation, I think, to want to play your normal defense against Xavier Simpson, and I think he can just pick a team apart with a ball screen if you play it straight up or how you want to play a ball screen, until teams start dropping and really forcing him to go over the top and do something. That's when Michigan will jump on these teams early. You saw some of that today, and basically Michigan's offense today was ball screen, switch, get a switch, isolate, and go make a play. Only about, I think, less than a third of their baskets were assisted. They didn't make a three-pointer in the second half. It was basically just one-on-one, beat your man, and get a bucket.
I could be totally wrong on this, but it seemed to me when it went sideways early for Indiana, I was unsure what they were doing on some of those defensive possessions. It almost looked like they were sending a help defender into ball screen situations where they would have the two guys out top and would almost cheat a third over and then leave someone else open on the wing, and all that did was just create, all you had to do was swing the ball. Even if the ball screen didn't work, all you had to do was swing the ball, and there was free buckets all over the place.
There were a lot of possessions where I don't know anyone on the floor knew what they were doing defensively for Indiana in that first half.
Yeah.
And they actually,
it showed.
To their credit, they fixed a lot of that in the second half. Michigan was much closer to a point per possession in the second half. They kind of had to grind for everything they got. But it was just too much too soon, and that was basically the game.
What did you think of Michigan down the stretch in the second half when they had some answers, right? When things got down to 9 and things like that, and you've seen it with every, good teams, great teams, whatever. Sometimes that's when wheels might come off, and it says a lot about teams when you see them in that spot. Okay, do they get a stop or do they get a score or blah, blah, blah. What did you see from them when those times came up?
Yeah, I thought it was good for Michigan that Indiana didn't just fold up shop and go home. Purdue, North Carolina, they basically did when they came and they got down, and then it just snowballed out of control. But now that with the Northwestern game and this game, Michigan has showed that they can answer some of those calls. I think Poole and Simpson both had huge baskets after Indiana got it down to single digits. There was one where I think Michigan got a shot clock violation or maybe Eli turnover. Then it was down to 7 at that point. They got to stop. Then they got a basket coming back the other way, and that does show something about their just kind of how this team is built, I would say.
Yeah, 42 points in the paint. 4 made three-pointers. Did they make a three-pointer in the second half?
They were 0-7 in the second half.
So the last three-pointer that Michigan made then was the one with 10-10 left. Matthews hit one that made it 30-13. And so they went 30 minutes without a made three.
And played their best offensive game of the year.
Wow. So what do you attribute that to?
It's just, I thought Michigan's offense was pretty damn simple in this game, and it was space the floor and beat your guy off the dribble. And they would take turns and just going right at. I also think
that's when you only commit 3 turnovers.
Yeah, and that start to the game was just so perfect.
Yeah.
They made, 11 of their first 12 shots or something along those lines, including a couple threes. And from there, it just went into game management mode. I mean, this game was under 60 possessions. I think it was the slowest game they played. Once you're up that big.
Indiana outscored them 34-30 in the second half.
Yeah, but if you're just going to take 30 seconds, not turn the ball over, and isolate with Jordan Poole, you're going to stay in the game, and that's basically all they had to do, I would say.
And the really, I think, fascinating thing about this team, I'm writing about it a little bit tomorrow, is, big-time teams win big-time games, and this is a group that I think it's sometimes forgotten a little bit. Played 6 NCAA tournament games last year. They played in front of 70,000 people in the national championship game. Like, if you think Jordan Poole or Charles Matthews or some of these guys are going to be, like, a little bit wrapped up in the moment on a big game, like, that, it ain't happening. And they proved it time and time again this year. Going to Villanova, they walked in there. That might as well have been a pickup game, like, in the gym. Like, they were just ready to go ball. And That's kind of the attitude that this group has. And the other thing that's interesting is all the different ways that they can beat you. Like, would anyone be surprised? These guys play again, right? Michigan goes down to Indiana a couple weeks, I believe, on Friday night. Like, would anyone be surprised if Brazdakis goes down there and has like a monster game, and everyone's going to be sitting there going into that game being like, man, you can't let Poole and Matthews, you got to shut those two down. They killed them last time. And then out of nowhere, you get a game from Brazdakis and stuff like that. To have, because this is the difference between Michigan and Indiana, is Indiana has these two stars in Morgan and Langford, and then they're just dying for anyone else to step up on any given night. Whereas Michigan, first of all, Brazdakis is the leading scorer on the team. You have Poole and Matthews who can do what they did tonight. And then you've got these other parts around them where, if Livers was healthy, maybe he could have had a good game tonight. Or Simpson goes and gives you unexpected offense. And now Brandon Johns, which we'll obviously talk about here, he steps up, right? Like, so it's all these different pieces. There's a reason that this team's undefeated, and that's why.
And some of those new pieces have really grown into themselves over the last month, and that's what you talk about. You're always going to talk about how great Michigan was in November, but I do think there's another level of offense that they can get where, if you think about last year's Michigan team, offensively, there was basically a formula for how them to win any game. You were going to have to get Moritz Wagner in the pick and pop. You were going to have to do X, Y, and Z. Now that script can go really any sort of direction, I would say. And you're seeing different elements of it, but it will, I think, become a much harder thing to guard. And I think this offense is certainly trending in the right direction.
Right. So people will obviously lose their shit here over Johns, and this is going to be, okay, how can you get him 20 minutes and blah, 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 and I'll just wet blanket that right now and say that he's going to see more time, yes, especially if Livers is out of the lineup, but I would just say don't be shocked if they go 3 or 4 games here and suddenly Brandon Johns is not a monster storyline. Like we've seen this happen before. This is a huge sign. I'm not trying to be an ass here, but where would you put this way? Where are you putting the hype meter in terms of where it is and where it should be?
I think you have to separate it into two elements. How important what Johns did today was to Michigan winning this game, and how important Johns is going to be to what Michigan does moving forward.
Okay, I'll buy that.
He completely saved their ass today. They don't win that game if he doesn't come in and hold his own. He had made a basket in one game ever.
Yes.
He came in and got 8 and 8 off the bench
Right.
when Austin Davis couldn't stay on the floor without fouling. He had to foul a minute.
Yes.
I mean, Teskey was
4,004 minutes for you guys at home. Yeah.
Teskey was picking up fouls that he just can't commit, considering that Livers is out in the situation, and John saved him. He gave him some. He wasn't perfect. They were outscored when he was on the court by 5 points. He made some mistakes. Obviously, he also walled up against Juwan Morgan a couple times, grabbed some big rebounds, had some putbacks, got involved in the ball screen game. These are all things we haven't seen a lick of. Not even in the end of a game against Norfolk State, we just haven't seen it. So that's big. On the other hand, he wasn't playing because he excelled in practice over the last week.
Right.
He was playing because there was no one else put on the floor.
Right.
And Beeline said as much after the game. If Livers gets healthy, Livers plays all those minutes and Johns doesn't see the court. So there's it's a big step. I'm not sure that he's going to start. I wouldn't expect him to play 20 minutes or whatever you said. I would say he'll probably play more minutes than Austin Davis moving forward, though,
but
which is a step.
With the cries of November and December to see Johns now, for there to be any sign or beacon that, this was there all along. It really wasn't there all along. And most of what he did today was like a basketball player making basketball players. So he was on the court and he made things happen, to his absolute credit. But I'm sure when they watch the film on some stuff, it's still going to be, where are you on this? Where were you on that? And blah, blah.
He had some really good defensive road. He made some plays that you just haven't seen. He's looked completely lost when he's played in the past.
Yeah.
And as much as Beeline can say that they didn't plan on him playing a lot of extra minutes, I really think that not having Livers in practice all week, there was certainly some emphasis made on getting him ready, that he hasn't had a chance, for all that he's struggled when he has played, he's never been on the court with starters.
Right.
Even when his first basket today came on a pick and roll with Eli Brooks.
Mm-hmm.
Well, give him a scout team bucket right there. But he... Those opportunities to play, you're going to just naturally look better as you play with starters, but you also have to have some success on the court to really find that confidence.
Mm-hmm.
I think he was asked after the game today how confident he was going into the game with some extra practice, and he basically said he wasn't confident. He needed something to happen on the court, and that really it's a step in the right direction. I mean, Isaiah Livers kind of he played a little more earlier, but he started cracking the rotation now. Aubrey Dawkins did something similar.
Mm-hmm.
We've seen this happen at this point. Michigan doesn't need a lot. They need 7 minutes, dunk off of a ball screen, dunk off of a putback. That's positive production for them.
Yeah, talking to Johns after the game, one of the things I asked him was, these guys have all played all these games, and these guys, like what I was talking about before, going to the national championship game and blah, 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 and here you come in as this freshman who played, in East Lansing and blah, 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 and I don't care how much raw talent you have, like, what was the gap when you walked in? And he said it was, quote, actually kind of crazy. Like, you just don't realize that, like, all these guys just start doing everything instinctually, and you're just kind of standing there with your head spinning, and I don't think his head has ever stopped spinning, but he has so much talent. Like, I've been high on him since high school. I think he's going to be great and all that stuff. I'm just saying, there's going to be people crying to see him more and more, and I'm just saying I just don't think it's going. You're going to get some minutes out of him, but it's not going to be. I don't think he's going to be a major rotation piece, but he can, unless he forces a hand to be that. So, I want to talk a little bit about the defense today. How far are we into this? Before we move on to Michigan State here. Indiana finished 23 of 54 from the field, 5 of 14 threes. They just didn't have anything beyond Langford and Juwan Morgan. Those two were really good beyond the first 10 minutes of the game, but it was a tough play. I mean, it was clearly just trying to get them the ball and
that's,
hope.
That's what their offense is. I think holding Indiana to 45% two-point shooting is something Michigan will probably be pleased with, considering how Michigan's two-point defense had kind of slumped, I guess you could say, over the last month, and Indiana was one of the best two-point shooting teams in the country. What's odd about what happened is that turnovers were so key in the first 5 minutes, and Michigan had a couple runouts, and Indiana looked completely frazzled. But then this was the least Indiana's turned the ball over all year, which is kind of how they, I guess, righted the ship, you could say. They only turned the ball over on 12% of their offensive possessions, and they're basically been 20% the whole year. So I have a hard time figuring out. On paper, it's the second worst defensive performance of the year by Michigan, but you go into the game, you say Indiana only makes 5 threes, and Indiana shoots less than 50% on twos, you'd be happy about that. So it's sort of a mixed bag. Juwan Morgan, he got 25 points, but he needed 22 shots and 3 turnovers to get it. Yeah. If you're given basically a point per attempt and turnover combined, you feel pretty good about that, I'd say.
It is fun to watch Romeo Langford play, though. I will say that he is smooth with 3 O's and a V. Just pretty damn good. Some of those moves he has when he just kind of goes off the bounce a little bit and gets into some space in the middle of the floor, and he can contort his body and slide by, and he's got all these little natural tricks of the trade that you're like, he's just on a different level.
Charles Matthews played great, but it's really, they're probably similar athletes, but Romeo's feel around the basket and his ability to finish is just so much more natural. Like, Michigan's worked on that with Matthews for, I guess, 3 years now.
He's got a certain kind of gracefulness to him, and it's all smooth and connected. All of his moves are connected. He doesn't do that Charles Matthews kind of get in the lane, stop on 2 feet, pump fake, turn around, spin around, pump fake, look for something, and then maybe flip up a shot. Like, I don't see him getting into that situation too often. So, okay, are you ready to switch over? Do you have any other takes?
Any other final thoughts?
I don't. Do you have any numbers you want to share?
Performance? I think the main number is that it was the best offensive game of the year for Michigan on a points per possession basis. I guess I would give one. I know Xavier Simpson, the numbers might not say he had a crazy game, but he just controls games in a way that is really hard to put your finger on. And you just need him on the court at all times. And that was quite obvious today that he just had the game whenever he knew what Michigan needed, and he just made those plays on both ends of the court.
Yeah. I totally agree. I thought he was great. Stat line doesn't say it like you said. It's just hard to quantify, and he also, what I talked to Jordan Poole about it, and what he does for the team's attitude is like. I mean, I know it's almost like becoming a cliche that everyone just feeds off this guy, but it is real. He is every bit as important psychologically as he is in the games, and he is crucial in the games.
And it's clear that psychological impact is clear because he has such obvious limitations to his game in certain regards, and he's still that important, which really just speaks to how he holds everything together. I think Beeline said after the game that they challenged him to be the most winningest player in program history, which seems like something he'll probably write down on his little list and is checking it off one game at a time. He's won a lot of games in 2.5 years.
Sure has. Okay, so let's slide over. On Saturday, I was in Columbus for the game and made it back, obviously, for this one, but it was a decent environment, not anything great as you would kind of expect from Value City Arena, but as we've talked about on this, road wins in this league are going to determine who is in contention and who's not in contention, and this is, you see Nebraska lose at Iowa today. It's going to be hard to get these wins in this league, and to go into Ohio State and not do what Michigan State did last year, which was, I think they were smelling themselves a little bit going into that game, and then it was a back and forth game that just unraveled in the final 2 minutes of the half, and they never recovered from it. And it was the exact opposite of that on Saturday. Ohio State very easily could have swung that game and pulled off the upset and blah, 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 and they were playing with all the confidence in the world, but Michigan State came back, and Cassius Winston is playing at as high a level, I think, of anyone in the league, and Nick Ward was right there with them, and it's a great win. I don't think Ohio State they're ranked like 14th or something. I don't think they're the 14th best team in the country, okay? But that's a great win.
I would say that Michigan State's win at Ohio State without a 3-year starter is probably the best Big Ten Conference win yet. The only one I could think, because you have to say,
Minnesota at Wisconsin's
is
pretty
the closest,
good.
But I would say Ohio State's probably a little better than Wisconsin, maybe.
Sure.
And I think that those are the wins that you only get a few chances at, right? You only have so many road games at top half league teams, and those are the wins that will eventually decide the Big Ten race down the stretch. And right now, it looks like the two teams fighting for that are the two that we talk about the most on this podcast.
Yeah, convenient. Big year for the pod.
Big
inaugural year for the pod.
Because there was 4 undefeated teams headed into this weekend. They all played each other. You can't take Michigan should beat Indiana at home. You should win all your games at home if you think you can compete. But to go on the road, win that game, and Michigan State took a punch. They kind of let the wheels fall off a little bit at the end of that first half, and then basically Cassius Winston brought him home.
Yeah, I mean, the second half for the most part was on a seesaw. They're just trading basket. Michigan State, they really, and I don't want to compare everything to last year's team because that's kind of the thing that's going right now, but this team has a way of staying within itself that is really impressive at this stage, and I think they lacked a little bit of it earlier in the year with and the loss in Kansas and the loss at Louisville, but they they didn't really blink in the second half, and I think when everyone knows who you're looking at, and it's all eyes on Cassius for a lot of that. They play with a confidence to them. So, because it wasn't just Winston in the second half. A guy like Aaron Henry, he drew a huge charge and made a huge corner three.
That motherfucker's good.
Yeah, did you see that?
Everyone heard it.
I don't think it was him though.
Okay.
I think he told. So if anyone doesn't know, just check Twitter. But yeah,
it was right in front of the bench
when Henry shot the three in the second half. Someone yelled, he should be a congressman. Yelled, "That motherfucker's good," and it got caught up by a mic. But
the combination of both confidence and surprise in the way it was yelled makes me think it might not have been him, but it was someone that was a little surprised he might have hit it.
There's a theory was floated yesterday because Chris Solari from the Free Press was asking guys about it in the locker room, and there's currently a theory that it might have been Xavier Tillman who was standing under the basket and was in line with the shot, and when it fell, you could see where Tillman was looking right on it, it was right on line with him, and they have those live hot mics right underneath the basket. So it's a working theory, but I don't think anyone can take the FCC hit perfectly because it would be really hard to prove. But point being, Aaron Henry with a ballsy shot, and he nailed it, and that guy is only getting better by the game.
Kyle Ahrens had some big plays.
Xavier Tillman on what wasn't a overall, outstanding day for him, which he's had a number of recently. He made a few really big buckets, including a couple over Caleb Wesson, who was the other story of this game. But yeah, they just got a lot of pieces, and they're clicking pretty good.
So, what do you think about the impact that Langford being out has on their team right now?
So it's interesting because in some aspects, and sometimes they look a little bit better with him off the floor. And I really do like the look when I think we talked about it last week, but I really do like the look when they get stuck into a half court offense and they can't score in transition like they want to. When they slide into half court and can put McQuaid out top and run around Winston looking for shots, it does look pretty good having your best shooter hunting shots. So it's a really interesting look. The thing, though, is Langford, I think, is a really easy target for a lot of criticism, mainly because he's been constantly expected to blossom into an All-American at any given minute. But he's pretty good, first of all, right? He's a pretty good damn Big Ten player. And the other thing is, you can play him for 30, 35 minutes and get reliable defense and get a guy who, for the most part, knows what he's doing and can play and do all these things and has all this experience and blah, blah, blah. The moment won't be too big for him, whatever. 30 minutes is a lot, and it has to go somewhere, and it can mess up other rotation things where maybe some guys have to get some minutes. If you catch a foul or two here or there, and suddenly you need to give Gabe Brown some half court or some first half run or something like that, there are bad residual effects that can come from those minutes having to go elsewhere.
So the big shifts have been more shots for Nick Ward and Cassius Winston, and then more minutes for probably McQuaid, Kyle Ahrens, and probably even some more too big action, I would say, probably.
They have been playing a lot of
the Tillman lineup more.
Yeah.
And right now, those three things are working. I'm not really a big Ewing theory thing, and I don't believe in all that, but I do think that long term this could actually be a good thing because it will force Nick Ward and Cassius Winston to be more aggressive. And Langford's an important offensive player, but he's also the least efficient offensive player on Michigan State's roster. And more shots for Winston, who's a historically efficient player, is just always going to be a good thing. Ward played 29 minutes, which I don't know if it's a career high, but it's got to be up there.
It's up there. It's not there, though.
So that sort of... And then you can add Langford back into that. Yeah. Langford can see that he doesn't need to do everything. And early in the year, he kind of did. He had some huge games when they were still looking for him to be that go-to guy. You can sort of come back with more of a balance. You've developed some trust in guy like Kyle Arns to play his role, hit threes. It sort of can be, as long as it's not a very long-term injury to Langford, it could almost be a long-term benefit, I would say.
And it's, Langford isn't a poor passer. I don't think. I mean, it's
no, and his ball screen numbers are better this year than they have been.
I would wonder, why couldn't he fly out top a little bit? And obviously McQuaid has put in minutes as the backup one, but
the end of the Louisville game is gonna sell any stock I would put in Langford as a ball handler.
Fair.
I think Matt McQuaid can play that. I would call it a Stu Douglas role.
Sure.
Very well.
Sure.
And you just trust him a little bit more. Winston he used 29% of their possessions, which I think is probably one of the higher marks he's had this year. And if he's not taking 12 shots a game, I don't know what you're doing, because he has to shoot the ball. And as Beeline would put it, he needs to be a hunter. He needs to hunt his shot, and I don't know that that's like Langford hunts shots. That's what he does. That's in his DNA. Winston does it when he feels like it's needed.
Well, and the problem is Cassius Winston ranks 6th in the country in assist rate. He already has an enormous job, and now it's just now you have 2 enormous jobs, right? Now, but I think he's a pretty elite player, so he can shoulder it. As for Langford, just in terms of me poking around and kind of asking and trying to get a sense for this thing, he saw a specialist. It's not. I thought the best news for him was that it's not. There's no cartilage damage. It's not a high ankle sprain. So it's something that will improve, and it might not linger into one of these. You get that high ankle sprain, and it can still get you 2 months from now. It can be a thing. It's not that, but all that said, I did not get any indication that this is okay. He might give it a run in practice this week and be ready. That ain't happening. I think he is at least probably 2 weeks out from playing, and then ankle injuries take time to get back from. So I don't see them.
And it is his ankle. On the broadcast at one point they said it was his foot. It's his ankle.
It's his ankle. That's what they have said. But he's receiving treatment. And blah, blah, blah. I would imagine he works his way back into the lineup mid-late this month. And from there, who knows. But, what you see right now, I think, is the Michigan State you're going to see for the immediate foreseeable future.
And what do you think of how the 2 big lineup is working?
Man, it's hard because I was not a proponent of it at all early in the year. But Xavier Tillman is definitely more advanced than I thought he was going to be, and they haven't gotten burnt by it. There's been very few moments where I'm like, you got to get those 2 can't be on the court together right now. This is a disaster. Doesn't really happen. They move fairly well defensively, and they also haven't run into any I'm trying to think of any 5-out type teams that they've run into, and.
No, they've been able to.
It isn't much. I'm just kind of going down this. No, it hasn't really happened whatsoever. So, as they run into teams like that, I don't know how much you're going to be able to do it. But unless someone forces you not to play that lineup, those 2 are both pretty hyper productive in a lot of ways.
It's almost impossible to stop. You don't have to worry about the right now. I just pulled the numbers. They're scoring 1.22 points per possession when both of them are on the floor, which is 7 points per 100 possessions better than their offense without that lineup on the floor. So that is key. They're shooting 66% on 2s when they're both on the court. So it's basically a layup. They get that high-low going. I mean, it's just hard to deal with all of that size. The defense takes a little bit of a hit, but you would expect that, and I don't think you really have to – I mean, this Michigan State team is all about the offense. This team is elite offensively, and – they're trending toward. I mean, they could end up near one of the best offenses in the country at this point. They're up to number 3 in Ken Pom adjusted offensive efficiency, and they're just tough to stop. I mean, you can say in the past you look at Michigan State and you say there's a way to stop them. You have to stop the 3 things they're trying to do. You have to stop transition. You have to stop the early entry pass into the post, and then you have to stop sort of their half-court set offense off of screens. Most people haven't been able to get past number one. Ohio State, you might say, stopped a little bit of the transition, but then couldn't stop the post. I mean, they're just – you go down that list, and it's just asking a lot to just keep Cassius Winston from just going straight to the basket or throwing the ball right into Nick Ward for a layup.
And Ohio State is not like some garbage defense. It's top 25 in Ken Palm. The most points they allowed this year was 72, and Michigan State just walked into their building and put up 86 without its, second or third leading scorer? That's crazy.
Mm-hmm.
That is really crazy. And I don't know if it's really setting in how ridiculous this offense is. And
1.23 points per possession through 4 Big Ten games.
What is it? What was
1.23 points per possession.
Jeez.
The next best offense in the conference is Nebraska at 1.12. So they're 11 points, 100 possessions better than any other offense. That is basically the same as the gap between Nebraska and basically the ninth place offense. So the next 8 teams are all in the gap that's as big as the gap between Michigan State and Nebraska.
Right.
So they just
wear teams down, especially when you get that Tillman and Ward lineup. They get teams into tough spots with foul trouble and stuff. I believe Ward is leading the country in fouls drawn, right?
I believe that, yeah. 9.4 fouls per 40 minutes.
I mean, that's a ridiculous number. He just, the more he plays, the more he pounds, too, right? Because he's one of these guys, the more touches he gets, the more aggressive he gets. But now the difference is he's not as prone to just doing something, ridiculous every third possession. He's really kind of bottled some of those old bad habits, and there was really only one moment yesterday, or maybe 2 moments, where you're like, "What are you doing there?" Like he got double teamed at one point and kind of dribbled himself into the corner, and in previous years he would do that on the second possession of the game or commit a bad foul and be on the bench. The last 2 times that they were in Columbus, he was on the bench within like a minute and a half of the game starting, and this time he plays 29 minutes and did it to the opposite. He drew a foul on Caleb Wesson.
In the second half, especially, they got a couple quick fouls called on.
And he made his free throws. He goes 11 for 14.
He also made some good passes out of
doubles, yeah.
It looked like he looked prepared. He looked like he knew where it was coming from. He knew exactly what he wanted to do, and he delivered the ball.
Which is key if you're going to play the 2 bigs. Because if you're going to play the 2 bigs, they're going to be defended likely by 2 bigs. And if you're doing that, of course you're going to double Ward, right? Because if you're not going to have if you're not going to have a stretch 4 out there who's going to take that other big out of the paint, you're going to have 2 bigs in the paint. You're going to double Ward every time. So if you're going to play that lineup, he has to be able to make quick decisions on touches when that second man comes in, and that can alleviate any concerns or whatever can come up when that lineup is out there.
Yeah, earlier this year, we talked about how Michigan State was playing fast.
Yeah.
And they're still playing way faster than they really ever have, which I find they've always been known for their transition offense, but they're ranked 73rd in tempo, and they've been in the 200s the last 4 years. They haven't really ever ranked in the top 100 in tempo under Izzo in the Ken Palm era. So that really, I think, to me, I don't think it's something they're doing differently. I think it's just that Cassius Winston is that good, and you can't – basically they run on every possession, and they have, but they're just getting what they want when they do run. That, I think, really speaks to just how effective they've been.
Do you have their possessions per game in their first 2 Big Ten games?
Like their tempo? Yeah. They played 64 and 68 possessions at Rutgers, and then 68 against Iowa. And then they're up around 70 in these games.
And what was Ohio State? Yeah.
Northwestern was 70, Ohio State was 69.
Okay, so they are bringing that down.
They're slowing down a little bit.
They're getting closer to what they were. So the previous 3 years, they averaged about, for the season, they averaged about 67 possessions per game over the last 3 years. 10 games into this year, when they were coming out of that Florida game, They were averaging at that time 71.3. Like that's when they were just flying all over the place a little bit. So they're definitely dialing it back a little bit, which will turn likely and it'll dial. Yeah, first of all, it's league games. You're playing a different brand of basketball, but also by slowing it down a touch, I think you are a little bit less vulnerable for foul trouble or not
and
foul
turnovers.
trouble for turnovers. I meant, and that's been kind of the biggest problem for them. But they were great in the Ohio State game.
Yeah, they did kind of lose that a bit late in the first half.
Yeah, there was a 2-minute swing that really...
Izzo was furious in the halftime interview that Cassius Winston just gave the ball away. He was not pleased with that, and Winston responded to that.
Yeah, he's got he's carrying himself a little bit differently. I think the big thing with him right now is responsibility. That in his first 2 years, if they lost, it usually really wasn't on him, right? Like he wouldn't be the one who would get blamed personally for losses. Really, it was on these other bigger names and stars and blah blah blah. Well, if they lose right now, that loss is Cassius's. He carries every L. If they lose, it's going to be on him. And when that sets in for some guys, that can kind of change some mindsets.
Yeah, think back to the game at Louisville. Mm-hmm. That was
on him. 100% on him. Yes,
and
absolutely.
Since then, they haven't lost.
Yeah.
That accelerates the ownership curve pretty quickly, I would say.
Did you have any takes on Ohio State coming out of that game? I mean, they ran into a bit of a buzzsaw, but...
Yeah, I have a hard time. I thought they were a good defensive team before that game, and I still thought they did some good things, but, man, they just got blitzed on their home court, and you worry about that defensively. Syracuse also kind of did that to them when they went there, and they're not particularly good offensively. I think Caleb Wesson is a good player. I don't think you know what you're going to get from any other guards on any given day. Mm-hmm. C.J. Jackson was excellent in the first half, and then I know he was cramping. I'm not sure what the report was, but Keyshawn Woods didn't get it done. Luther Muhammad shot went in a few times, but, man, it was an adventure. Mm-hmm. They have those athletic guards who can do some things, but you saw that they don't really have a guy that they can hang their hat on right now. And I don't know how you have – it was cramping for C.J. Jackson, right? I believe that's what they kept saying on the broadcast.
Yeah, that's what the Ohio State writers said.
I don't know how you're having cramping issues in the 15th game of the season. I know.
Yeah, hydrate up, man.
So do they look like a Big Ten contender?
I don't.
The only
so.
two teams that look like Big Ten contenders are Michigan and Michigan State right now.
Yeah, and it didn't help with Jackson out. They played Dwayne Washington probably more minutes than he might have needed there because that game. I think it was in his head a little bit what that game meant. He's a Grand Rapids kid. He spent, he would be around the Michigan State locker room on a weekly basis for most of his high school career before he transferred out to Sierra Canyon, and he wanted it so bad. Like he just wanted to make the back-breaking shots so bad in that, and he ended up just taking some horrible shots, and they weren't turnovers, but they might as well have been.
Yeah, they kind of just imploded down the stretch.
Totally.
I thought Weston even sort of imploded a bit there where he was so frustrated with things that happened. He just tried to kind of force the issue. And it's one thing to take a pick-and-pop three in the first half when everything's going good, but I don't know about forcing that shot late in the game. It's just kind of speaks to not having a point guard that you can put the ball in their hands and say, make the right decision, get us a good shot on any possession. Who is that guy for them? C.J. Jackson. He wasn't on the court.
On a good day, right.
So
Andre Wesson looks like he could have it in him every once in a while, but
Keyshawn Woods had like a huge game earlier this year in a big spot, and then he had 2 points on 0-5 shooting.
Yeah.
Right? They just don't have a guy, right? So the same guy can go for 18 points against Illinois and then go score 2 points. It's just like, what do you don't know. They're solid.
Yeah.
But I don't think they have that next level.
Yeah.
That's how I kind of – what do you think of – if you want to backtrack and talk about – is Indiana a Big Ten contender for you?
Contender – no, not for the championship. I like them a lot. I really like those guys. But until there's some semblance of a third guy, I just can't buy them. And I'm sure that they the thing about Indiana is it's a team that can go 8-2 or 9-1 at home, so they'll be in it on the basis of that. Maybe not 9-1. That's probably a little generous, but it's going to be really, really hard to win there. I would say 8-2 is probably a pretty solid expectation for that. So, if you can do that, the big question is with Indiana, can they go 500 on the road and get up to like that 13-14 win area? It's going to be pretty tough because more and more teams are just going to key on Morgan and Langford. I would cheat on them. I would send help defenders on both of them. Do everything. I would just make anyone else on that team beat you.
Yeah, and we spent a lot of time talking about how great the Big Ten is going to be this year, but I think we've already seen how the league can kind of cannibalize itself because
this week was a perfect example.
I don't know who we could. You're going to say who's going to finish third in the Big Ten? Mm-hmm. I couldn't even pick three teams that I think are most likely to fight for that spot.
Totally.
And that
right, and you would also say today, Big Ten's the best conference in America, and will probably have the most amount of NCAA bids in the country. But there's only 2 national championship contenders.
Yeah, there's only two teams that I'm sure are legit
second weekend,
top 10, top 15 teams, right? Like, who would you bet on that actually has what it takes to? I think a lot of teams can win a first round game. I don't know that a lot of teams have bet to win 2 games in one weekend.
Yeah, I would agree. I would agree with that. And that all goes back to what the job that was done in non-conference play. That the league took care of business and it'll get itself the bids, but I just don't know how the best teams are. And at the same time, though, it's January 6th. And last year on January 6th, Michigan was probably seen as a pretty nice team, but was probably being talked about the same way that right now we're talking about some of the
Nebraska.
Yeah, right. You know what I mean? Like, so, you never know what can happen, but that's certainly the way it feels right now. All right, we're gonna wrap it on that. We gotta go to the bar. Subscribe to both umhoops.com. Become a Patreon member, right? If you're
we don't do the Patreon, just subscribe to Hoops. We don't have to say the Patreon anymore.
Okay,
cut that out.
I'm sorry.
Keeping it simple.
Subscribe to umhoops.com for all your Michigan needs. Subscribe to theathletic.com for everything else.
Subscribe to this podcast.
Subscribe to the podcast. Tell your friends about it. Share it. Subscribe.
5-star reviews.
If you want to write a little review, we appreciate those. Maybe we'll start reading them on the air sometime or something like that.
I know some people do that.
Yeah, I've heard that as well. So this was kind of an impromptu deal. We hope you liked it.
We hope you can hear it.
Yeah, I definitely hope you can hear it. I'm really surprised we didn't get chased out of this room either. But good stuff. Thanks for doing it, man.
Awesome. Talk to you guys maybe later this week, but maybe
definitely later this week.
All right,
we'll do some Big Ten talk.
We're going to dive into the Big Ten.
We'll preview the upcoming games for Michigan, Michigan State, and talk about the league as a whole. So look forward to that. Thanks for listening. Be sure to tip your bartenders and your servers.